So I had a night in, and I decided that it was about time. Yeah, let's watch some movies. Let's sit down. Let's have a nice time and just, watch some things that I've been meaning to catch up with for a while, right? And one of the things I started watching a couple of weeks ago, but didn't get around to finishing, was The Castle of Cagliostro, the Lupin the Third movie that Hayao Miyazaki directed. It was his directorial debut, I believe. It was made before the formation of Studio Ghibli, and it's kind of notable among Lupin the Third fans as being like one of the, I think, most prominent like mainstream Lupin the Third properties. And I've heard like quite a bit about this movie. I've seen like people talk about how controversial it is, and I can kind of see why. Up until like the ending, when it all came together, I was really thinking that like, do I like this? Do I like this? It reminded me like a lot of how like I felt about Casino Royale, right? When you're sitting down and you're watching this and you're just like, oh yeah, um this isn't a good adaptation of the original book. It has like woke elements to it. Like I don't know how I feel about the changes. Daniel Craig as Bond. It felt a lot like that. Watching this movie, like seeing like the direction they took with it, and like the premise and like the subversive elements to it. Like it would be really easy, I think, to kind of write this movie off. Like the way I see a lot of people describe it is that it's a good movie, but not a good Lupin the Third movie. And I'm not sure I agree with that sentiment, right? Because I do think if it's a good movie, it's a good movie, period. Like it doesn't matter if it's like a Lupin the Third property or a product or whatever. Like if it actually does have like a really good, legit original storyline that sucks you in and keeps you engaged, then yeah, it is a good movie. But like there were like some aspects of this where I'm just kind of like, really, this is the direction we're going with here. This is what we're doing. So I totally understand why people really don't. Hardcore fans kind of have issues with it. And I myself, I expect like, when I finish this movie, even though I really came away with it with positive feelings, like I feel like as I become more and more acclimated to Lupin the Third, as I like watch more and more of these movies, watch more and more of these series, like get more and more familiar with it, because I do think I'm a fan at this stage. I've seen enough Lupin the Third material to kind of know that I love the characters, love the setting, love the general idea, love the episodic nature of it, love the wacky hijinks, the animations, the characters. Like I just think this is like a top tier anime property, really. Like I don't see a lot of people really acknowledge that. It's kind of sad, like seeing seeing me get so into this, but then like seeing everybody else, just get excited about moe shit, or like just the seasonal romance anime. Like no, this is the good stuff. This is like legit the stuff that I really enjoy. The fun, wacky adventures, right? And the Castle of Cagliostro, because it was directed by Miyazaki, because it's a film, because it's somewhat digestible, because it has a really interesting like beginning, middle, and end. Like this is, I think, probably the easiest way to get into the franchise. I think. And this isn't the first Lupin the Third property I've seen, obviously, but watching this, I can kind of see why how easy it is to get into this. Like right from the beginning, you're introduced to your characters, Lupin and Jigen. Oh, actually, I was watching the older dub, so like he's not Lupin in this, he's the Wolf, right? Like you see his name spelled out occasionally, but like the characters all refer to him as Wolf in this, and it's really distracting, but eventually it kind of like circles around and becomes kind of badass. Like the entire movie is kind of like that. Like you kind of think that like, it's going in a direction that you don't really care for, and then it kind of like comes back around and becomes based. But like anyway, like I'm watching this movie. Right from the get-go, you have like Lupin and Jagan like pulling a heist, and like you get like the typical Lupin the Third stuff. You get like the realization. You get the getaway scene, and you get them celebrating their big W, and then they realize like the counterfeit money, the money they've stolen is counterfeit, right? And so that leads them down this trail where they go to Cagliostro, the country of Cagliostro, which is like it's so small. It has like They specifically state it has like 3,500 residents or something crazy like that, which is like, and I don't know what the world's smallest country is. Like they specifically say Cagliostro is like the world's smallest country with like 3,500 residents. And I'm just kind of like, how do they keep the economy going? Like it just doesn't make any sense to me. But like, yeah, they end up in Cagliostro and they end up in this conspiracy like that involves like the counterfeit scheme and the girl and like this royal family that dates back 500 years. And this is a problem I have with a lot of Miyazaki films, right? Like this is a reoccurring issue with like basically all of them is that they don't really have a natural plot progression, right? Every single time, like you get like a really good setup, you get some really good animation, like you get like all these really cool like detailed sequences, you get invested in the characters, right? You get like really cool moments with like Lupin, Jigen, and like the girl like really early on, right? You have that scene where Lupin they have to chase like the girl on the highway and they have to get her like she passes out and they have to get her out of the speeding car and they go over the cliff and then like you have like lots of really cool funny interactions with the characters, right? But then like they do this thing where they like reveal more about the plot. Like, and this is one of the things that I just cannot stand about this movie. This idea that Lupin knows the girl and that he wants to save her more than claiming the treasure because even like the most basic bitch like casual fan of Lupin the Third knows that like he wouldn't give a shit about the girl, right? Like this is the thing that a lot of people have a contention with, and I think I do agree with this, is that like Lupin would not care about the girl under any circumstances. And they try like giving some elaborate backstory that like, oh, he knew her, he met her when he was first starting out, and he didn't recognize her until just now, and like they have this really deep relationship, and like that they're really close, like she's in love with him, blah blah blah. Blah. Like they try doing that, but it really, 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 really does not work. Even though the characters are both really likable, they're compelling, they're interesting, and it leads to a really good payoff. Like the fundamental truth of the reality is, like the idea that this is like some super special girl from Lupin's the past is just completely ridiculous, right? Like I think it would have made a lot more sense to just have Lupin learn about the treasure, go after that, and then get embroiled in the controversy. Like, I don't think you need this aspect of the plot where Lupin is just like trying to establish the relationship with this girl, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. To me, to me, they needed to like build up the whole like treasure aspect more, right? To me, like the count's plan makes no sense. Like, oh, I want the treasure of Cagliostro. Why? Like, oh, I want to marry this girl. Why? Oh, I need the rings. Like, why? Like, there's an answer to these questions, right? And it makes sense. Like, but at the same time, like, so many details about the count, like his operations there, his background, his behavior, that like it just leaves you with more questions than anything, right? Like why exactly does he need to marry the girl specifically, right? To legitimize his control over the country? Like who gives a shit? Like he already has all the power. He controls the entire thing. He controls the entire world, as we've seen, like with the the low key, like incredibly base sequence when like Zenigata goes to like the delegates of the world, like the UN or something, and he tries presenting like the information on like the counterfeit conspiracy, and like nobody wants to do anything because like they're all bought and paid for politicians, right? Like it's a Zenigata unbelievably based. And like the characters go out and they get into this cool confrontation. Like if I had any real problems with the movie, right? It had nothing to do with the animations or the characters or like the direction. Like it's entirely just plotting, like just basic things that really would have been fixed if they had like an adequate script, right? Like there's this one scene early on. This is the moment where I realized that like I had like very, very severe issues with like the scripting of this, where like Lupin has to get past a door, right? And what does he do? He waits for like Zenigata to get rejected by the guards of that door, and then he comes up in a Zenigata disguise, and then he tells the guard that was Lupin. the guy who was with like two guards, right? And then like they leave their post to go after like the supposed imposter. Like it's unbelievably dumb, right? Like you have a lot of things like that that don't really make a whole lot of sense in context. Um when watching this movie, like again, Lupin the Third really what the reason I love this IP so much is that it really tries to keep itself like relatively grounded, right? It's like it tries to keep itself grounded in reality. It has like real world locations. It has like uh, emphasizes real world culture, real world physics, mechanic, like things, right? Real world concepts, right? Like it's not that exaggerated of an IP, I think. And like the Castle Cagliostro is just, I think I think really like just goes way too far with like the cartoony aspects in a lot of ways. Like there's this bit where like he's trying to like it's trying to set up this bit where he has to get into like a castle tower, right? So he takes out this giant line, like attaches it to a rocket, and like the implication is that like he's gonna use the rocket to fire the grappling hook across to like the other side and like climb up it. But like he screws it up and then ends up like running down like the castle tower, and then he just kind of like awkwardly jumps across like the rooftops to the tower he was trying to get onto, and I'm just like, okay, that was a really well animated sequence. It was funny, it was engaging, it had a lot of cool details to it, but like, why didn't he just do that to begin with? Like, if he could just jump, like why bother with the grappling hook and the rocket? Like, it's just things like that just like really took me out of it, right? And that's really typical for like Miyazaki products, is that like uh it just certain aspects of it just ruin the entire thing, right? And it's really a shame too, because I think this game, like this movie, has a lot of really cool aspects to it, like lots of really cool imagery, great animation, great sequences, like that fight scene at the end. Um, like the main problem I imagine people might have with it is if you're not familiar with Lupin the Third already, like if you don't know who like Goemon is or Fujiko is, like you're going to be kind of confused about that. I think like Zenigata and like Jigen in comparison are relatively well built up, but like Fujiko in particular kind of feels like she comes out of nowhere. And like you just have to like buy the fact that like, oh man, Lupin, oh I'm sorry, the wolf knows who she is and knows what she's capable of, and she's willing to like set aside her goal to help him out, like in his mission to rescue this girl, right? And you you eventually like get to the ending, right? You get to the ending. I think the worst part of this, like, I don't I really hated this. Like the sequence where like Lupin goes to her in the tower, right? Where they have that like heartfelt conversation about like, "Oh, I'm totally going to rescue you." And then like he doesn't have a plan, he doesn't have anywhere to go, he doesn't have any idea what he's doing. Like why would he go up there and tell her that he was going to rescue her instead of just going up there and doing it? Right? Like the way he's acting up to that point, like you think he has a plan to do it, you think he has a plan to get away, but like he just doesn't. Like he just goes up there and gets captured. And like it really feels like they just did that so like he and Clarice could have this like heartfelt, well, the princess. I don't know if her name is Clarice in like the proper dub, but like yeah, Clarice, the princess. Like they have this heartfelt conversation, like, and it's just like it's so cheesy and so melodramatic. I've heard like Miyazaki personally say like he dislikes the character of Clarice, and I can totally see why. Like she's so one note and like so one dimensional and like really has nothing going for her. And like it really sucks too, because like with that introduction with like her like belting down the highway in like in a wedding dress, like trying to evade her captors, like she comes off like a really interesting character, and like the way she cares for Lupin, like after like they fall off the cliff together, like that made me really interested in the character. But like her actual motivations and a resolution of just being in love with Lupin, right? It's like it just feels like kind of a disservice to the character, and it's such a shame because I typically like a lot of these like random one-off like Lupin the Third characters. Like I've noticed this with a lot of like Miyazaki films, is that they always do this thing where like characters like have this deep relationship, and then they like bid their farewells at the end. You know, like Spirited Away does this. Like it's kind of a staple for him, right? And this one you get this like really cool heartfelt ending where like Clarice admits she's in love with Lupin, and for some reason like Lupin like decides to just leave. And like personally, like I think that's based. You know, I thought that was like an unbelievably base thing to do, right? Like I think that was objectively the right thing for him to do in that circumstance. But like, here's the thing here: like, Lupin is not a good person, right? It was not in character for him to do that, right? Like, I think realistically, he probably would have fucked her and left. But no, instead he does this thing where like, oh, you're gonna find your true love someday. Like, I'm not right for you and stuff like that. And like, yeah, that's true. Like that is 100% based. Like he understood like that they weren't right for each other, right? And like she's a stupid 19-year-old kid. She doesn't know what she wants. So like yeah, that was objectively the best thing like to do. But at the same time, like is it something that Lupin would do, right? Like again, like this kind of goes to my problem with this movie. Like would Lupin do this? And like the answer is like a resounding no. And like the cope I've seen from like the creators, from like Miyazaki, I think is that like, oh, this takes place at the end of his career. Hey geniuses, right? Hey genius. Like Lupin's career never ends. Like this guy has been going on adventures since like what, the 40s? Well, 60s probably. How long has it been? Like uh I actually don't know when it started publication. It would have had to been like in the 50s at the earliest, right? I don't know my Lupin history that well, but like this guy has been doing this shit like constantly in all of these movies and all this material. But no, you're gonna say this is like the natural endpoint for the character, right? Like this. Like to me, like that's kind of disrespectful to like the Source IP. Like Miyazaki, I think is the kind of person who thinks he's like he knows better than the original creators, and like the worst thing about that is that like he has like the talent to back it up. So like yeah, going off the rails, like it's kind of like how it's kind of like how um certain people like get a hold of like Marvel or DC properties and then decide to like do radical like insane things with the characters. And like it's even if like the stories are well executed and if they're good, like actual hardcore fans are going to look at them and just be kind of like, well, like the characters wouldn't do this, right? Like, this goes against like everything the characters stand for, like the values, like all these years and history of continuity with all these plot lines that we genuinely enjoy are being thrown away to like, I don't know, like make Batman a fascist or something, or make Superman evil, like which is like something that fundamentally the characters are not supposed to be, right? So even if like the storylines are good and engaging and they bring up good topics, it's like, well, is that the right story to tell for the brand though? And like in a lot of ways, I think the Castle of Cagliostro is really does fail to encapsulate what makes Lupin the Third great. Like I really don't think like they do enough to build up the villain. I don't think they do enough to make the female lead interesting. I don't think they do enough with like the established characters like Fujiko or Jigen or like Goemon. Like Goemon just kind of shows up out of nowhere and then just kind of like chills, and like he helps out sometimes, but like like I said, he just kind of comes out of nowhere like with no real introduction. It's like okay, like it's fun, it's engaging, it has like a shocking conclusion, even if it doesn't make any sense. Like you have all these like cool aspects to it. Like it's fun to watch, but at the same time, like okay, but I'm sure there has to be better Lupin the Third products out there. There have to be better movies than this specifically. I'm really curious if how long it's going to be until I find something that like I can definitively say is better than like the Castle of Cagliostro, right? Like I definitely want to say the TV series is better, but like again, I have to watch like more Lupin the Third related stuff. So yeah, I'm definitely looking at like more Lupin the Third material. I definitely do want to get into it, but Yeah, watching this movie, like I'm definitely the worst part is like I genuinely like the movie, right? Like I thought it was fun to watch. I thought it had great animation, just great fight scenes, like great choreography, like great character design works. Like but like again, like the plotting is just like all over the place. Like they don't do a good job of making the situations and the characters interesting. And to me, it's kind of a shame to come away from this thinking that like this film is kind of a disappointment. But I still enjoyed it for what it was, which is far more than I can say for the vast majority of Hayao Miyazaki's works.